You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. After LSU, the win over Texas A&M, there were probably, I would assume in some order, three things that you're most concerned about. Number one, what is Jayden Daniels' Heisman chances? What are the odds right now? Staff changes, which seem inevitable. And where's LSU going to go in the bowl game? Who's going to play? So let me touch on each of those here. First things first, the Heisman conversation is not great. And it's kind of what we thought, where Bo Nix played on a standalone window on Friday night. Everybody watched, and he played really well, and Oregon beat Oregon State. You know, went into Friday with Jayden Daniels as the leader in the betting odds. By Friday after that game, it was a virtual dead heat where Bo Nix had taken the lead in some of the sport books, and Jayden had a lead in several of the others. By the time you got past the LSU-Texas A&M game on Saturday and into today, Bo Nix is a consensus betting favorite now to win the Heisman Trophy, and the lead's growing a bit. As of right now at DraftKings, Bo Nix is minus 160, and Jayden Daniels is plus 130. So for those that don't bet, you don't know what that means. It means you'd have to bet $160 to win 100 on Bo Nix. And for Jayden, if you bet 100, you'd win 130. So Bo Nix, while it's not a massive lead, the lead is growing, at least at the sports books. Now, it's interesting. I did hear, I was listening to Jimmy and Charlie earlier today on Live at Lunch, and they were speaking with one of the odds makers from one of the sports books, and they were asking a question about those odds. And well, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but the answer was the odds have shifted based on not necessarily what the sports book's opinions are, but based on the money coming in. So there's been a lot of bettors that watched Bo Nix in that performance on Friday night, and likely also assumed that with Bo Nix having another opportunity to play this weekend on Championship Saturday in a rematch against Washington, whereas Jayden Daniels isn't going to have that opportunity, money is coming in on Bo Nix, which is why you've seen the odds grow. The public has been wrong before. I think if you're an LSU fan and you want Jayden Daniels to win the Heisman, there's two things. Number one, most importantly, you want Bo Nix to struggle and Oregon to lose to Washington on Friday night in Las Vegas. That's the most important thing that could happen. Because if Nix struggles and Washington beats Oregon, then I think Jayden Daniels wraps it up. Number two, I think LSU has done a really, really good job of promoting Jayden Daniels. If you haven't seen it, LSU did launch a website, which is essentially it's a landing page stating Jayden Daniels' case for Heisman. It's thatkidjayden.com, thatkidjayden.com. You go to the website, and it explains everything. There's videos about him. There's with him. There's all the stats that you would possibly need, comparing Jayden to the other finalists this year, or who the other presumed finalists are going to be. Jayden leads the country in total yards, total touchdowns, passing touchdowns, rushing yards for a quarterback, passer rating, which is an NCAA record, plays of 20 or more yards, QBR, yards per passing attempt, yards per carry, yards per play, expected points added, points above average, weighted EPA per play. I mean, I'll say it again. There's an objective nature of this. Jayden Daniels has been the most outstanding player in college football. He has, objectively, again, look at all of the numbers in the stat accumulation against the seventh best schedule in college football, and Jayden Daniels has been objectively the most outstanding player. The subjective nature of how you interpret all these stats, though, i.e. wins, team success, is what's going to ultimately sway voters one side or the other. So LSU's doing their part for what it's worth, but Bo Nix has the lead, and if you want to make sure that Jayden locks up the Heisman, you just got to hope that Washington and Michael Penix rise up, have an awesome day, and beat Oregon for the Pac-12 championship. As far as staff changes go at LSU, I have operated under the assumption since the Ole Miss game that there was going to be a change at defensive coordinator. And my reason has always been the same. I'm not breaking news. I'm not telling you something I know. I've just, since that game, looked at LSU defensively and said, you can't give up 700 yards and have the worst defensive performance ever in program history and keep your job. I'm talking about Matt House here. I'm not pounding the table. I'm not saying fire the coach, all that sort of stuff. My opinion is I think LSU would benefit from a change. I do. For whatever reason, Matt House's message this year didn't take with the players. They weren't able to execute what he was trying to do, and there were clearly games where they didn't do enough. I understand LSU doesn't have the best talent. This doesn't look like an LSU defense. And that's fine. So my expectations aren't that this LSU defense should have been a top 10 defense in the country, or even a top 20 or 30 defense in the country. But you can't be the worst defense we've ever seen. Only Florida and Vanderbilt allowed more points per game against conference opponents this year than did LSU. And that's just not acceptable. So I've heard a lot of scuttle that there would be multiple staff changes on the defensive side. I was not told names. I'm not sure if that will come to fruition. After the game, Brian Kelly was asked about, if there would be staff changes. Here's what Brian Kelly said after the game.
Every year there's going to be an evaluation. I mean, I evaluate what I've done, and I have to look at, as the leader of this program, how did I lead this year? So it starts with me. And then I'll evaluate all of our coaches and, our support staff as well. Everybody is part of this evaluation process. Our players will be evaluated this week, and then I'll go through a lengthy evaluation process of our entire staff, not just the coaches, but the entire support staff as well. The ultimate goal here is to win championships, but I also know that the development of this program is still ongoing, and that's an important piece in this evaluation process as well.
So players, coaches, support staff will all be evaluated here over the next week. Remember, the important timeline to follow is the portal window opens a week from today. On Monday the 4th, December the 4th, the portal window opens. And that's where it feels like if you're going to make a change, you got to make that announcement if you're going to do it before the portal window closes. And look, for whatever it's worth, we've talked a lot, and I know I've used the term the worst ever. Just for context, remember, 2020 was the worst LSU defense we've ever seen. They played 10 games that year in the COVID year, and they were all conference games. So remember, that defense didn't have the luxury of playing a Grambling, an Army, a Georgia State to lower those averages, right? So those were 10 conference games. And that team allowed 34.9 points per game. So just a fraction of a point under 35. So 34.9 points per game. This team, against 8 conference opponents, allowed 33 per game. So 2020, against an all-SEC schedule, allowed 2 more points per game on average than this one did. So take whatever metric to compare and contrast you want, who was the worst. Like 2020 and 2023 are the 2 worst defenses any of us have ever seen. 2008 was awful. 1998 with Lou Tepper and 99 were awful. But they pale in comparison to how bad 2020 was and how bad this one was. Lou Tepper didn't keep his job after 1999. Bradley Del Pivito, Doug Mallory didn't keep their jobs after 2008. Bo Pelini didn't keep his job after 2020. It's hard to justify bringing back Matt House after this. So I will continue to assume there's going to be a change. And if Brian Kelly decides not to make a change and keep the status quo, he better have a damn good explanation and a very well laid out and explained plan for how he's going to overcome that. Otherwise, he will completely lose faith from this fan base, and that's justifiable too. Because seeing something as bad as this year's LSU defense was and keeping things status quo, it doesn't even feel like a sensible option. So we'll wait for this evaluation period and see what ultimately Brian Kelly elects to do. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.